Hello everybody, it's Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today I am joined by two of my peers, Bernhard Heidkamp of BehindTheAudio.com and Christopher Coleman of Tracksounds and ChristopherColeman.com. Together we will take a close look at the career of the late great James Horner, a composer whose untimely death not only shocked the film world, but also left a huge gap, which might never ever be filled again, actually. And thank you guys for joining me today.
It's great to be on. Thank you for the invitation.
Sure thing. Guys, first question. What is your all-time favorite James Horner score and why? I'm gonna start with you, Chris.
Oh, great. That is a really hard question to answer because it changes from time to time for me. But being put on the spot, I will have to say that Braveheart is my favorite James Horner score. It kind of epitomizes probably his golden era of the 90s, and that being in 1995, I believe, was that score. I remember hearing it in context in the movie for the first film, and it just gripped my heart. It broke my heart. It inspired me at times. It thrilled me at other times, and it's just kind of remained. It's always in the top three. It kind of bumps around between that. Sometimes Searching for Bobby Fischer's at the top, but Saving Private Ryan, Braveheart is usually in the one or two position. So I'll say right now, Braveheart. I think it's the best he's ever done. I think it's better than Titanic. I mean, it kind of set up Titanic a little bit. But yeah, it's just a brilliant score from start to finish, and I can never listen to just one track of it. Once I start, I'm listening to the whole thing.
Sounds good. Bernhard, what about you?
Well, for me, it's The Land Before Time.
Mm-hmm.
It's I'm 24 years old, so I still grew up with that movie, and always noted, even as a 3-year-old, I noticed the music and always wanted to listen to the Diana Ross song. My mom had it on a cassette, and I always wanted to listen to that one in the car. And years later, many years later, when I knew that you could get the actual score from a movie, because when I was listening to that song, I always thought, well, the singing is totally ruining the thing. Sorry, Diana Ross. I like this song, but I wanted to have the film stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And well, when I was around 13, I learned about film scores actually being available, and after Star Wars, this was probably the first score I looked for to find. And of course I couldn't get the CD because it's expensive as hell, especially for a 14-year-old, so I didn't get the CD until my, I think, 18th birthday. But I found it on YouTube and listened the hell out of it, especially Whispering Winds, which in my opinion is, especially the last 3 minutes, is the best thing that any person in any time has ever written for choir.
Wow.
Whether it's film music, classic, or whatever, those last 3 minutes of Whispering Winds, where he just gets the typical James Horner angel choir. James Horner is a man of many, let's say, cliches, and this is probably his biggest, and I love it to death, and it's best presented in Land Before Time, which is full of sweeping themes, but the actual main theme, the one the song is based on, is James Horner's best theme, one of the best themes ever written for anything. As far as I know, one that isn't from something else that is fully completely by him, and it's so amazing, and I love that score. It's my second favorite score of all time.
Wow, that's amazing.
You both made good points. Yes, actually, I think my all-time favorite score of James Horner would actually be Braveheart as well. Excuse me?
You're a copycat.
I stole it from him.
Well, the film, I hold the film in very high regard, and I think it's one of the best pictures of the 90s, and I still consider it to be Mel Gibson's greatest directorial achievement. And the score, I think it's one of the absolute biggest textbook examples that showcase what music can really do for a picture. I think it's so hard to imagine this film with a different score. And James Horner brought so much emotion and quality to the table for Braveheart. I think it's such a brilliant score. I mean, some of the action parts might sound a little generic, if I may call it that.
Really?
It's not as mature as James's, let's say, other action pieces, but I think it was right for the picture. But in terms of melody, in terms of emotion, and especially the last act of the film, and also when it culminates into the execution scene and all that stuff, that's one of the very best pieces of music anybody has ever written for a film.
Yeah, I would have a hard time arguing with that.
Yeah.
And the end credits that follow it are so cathartic because you go through this amazing roller coaster of emotions in the last few minutes of that film, and then he was so good at writing end credit suites, and I feel very similarly about Legends of the Fall. You go through this roller coaster climax of the film, and then his end credits come up, and it's very cathartic. It's just like, now I can just process all these emotions that I've just had and all these feelings and thoughts that I have about this film, and it just brings me through it and just kind of walks me through it. And it's like, okay, come down from all your emotions and get in, come back to earth. And he does that, and he kind of holds your hand through his music and his end credits, and I love that about him. And there are few who do it as good as him in terms of end credit suites.
Absolutely.
Well,
yeah.
Can I make myself a bit unpopular because I'm not a huge Braveheart fan? I don't hate it. Like you said, I think it's the last 3 or 4 cues, like the finale and then the end credits, are magnificent. They are absolutely amazing. But as Michael said, I don't like the action music in that one as well. I don't find it very generic, more, dare I say, boring. I agree that the full Kroll or Willow style of complex, fully orchestral action writing wouldn't with millions of brass layers going at it wouldn't be perfect for Braveheart. But I still think there are tracks like, I think it's Revenge, with just like 6 minutes, just a bit of percussion clicking, and it goes on and nothing really happens. And I really find it like it works in the film, but I think it could have been better on the album. I only own the original album, and I think I don't listen to it very often because I think it drags a bit. And the bagpipe variations of the main theme in the first, like there are 3 or 4 cues where it appears, and it always sounds a bit the same. Like Braveheart, really, it has a lot of tracks I really, really love, but I find some of it pretty repetitive, and so I don't want to say that it's bad or something, but I never got the whole fuss it got.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's a state of preference, actually. I mean,
it's a tough thing.
Yeah,
it's a tough thing
totally.
Because for me, and I've shared this on my podcast a lot in terms of how I came into appreciating film music, and one of the main things about film music is when I listen to it, it's about re-experiencing the film, or mostly films that it's attached to. Now, if the film is really good, then going through that process and listening through that score is going to be a really good experience. And in the case of Braveheart, that is an all-time favorite film. So going through the score, even the action tracks, it's not just music, it's recalling the whole scene that's taking place at the same time. And so it's it's a fuller experience, at least for me, when I'm listening to scores from films that I love. And that probably maybe is unfair to some degree, but I don't know how to divorce the two things. I mean, if the movie's so fantastic, how do I not give credit to the score when I'm listening to it on its own, even though it was the film that I loved so much. And it was a part of the film, but it obviously wasn't carrying the film. So that's why even those action cues to me, even though they can be really long and it's just repetitive percussion, when I listen to them now, I'm re-experiencing the whole Bannockburn scene or the Sterling fight or what have I'm seeing those, I'm hearing the lines, I'm seeing the imagery, and so it's a pleasurable, even though it's bloody war, a pleasurable experience.
Yeah, very, very true. I mean, you both got valid points here. But I think, Braveheart, James Horner was really great at writing or underscoring emotion, and especially when there was some sort of, romance involved, and the relationship between, love interest, human beings. And when I listen to cues like Wallace Courts Marin or the Secret Wedding, or For the Love of a Princess, or the actual
Princess Plaids for Wallace's Life.
Yes,
is the best track on that album, in
yeah,
my opinion.
It's great.
I love it. It brings
really
me to
great.
tears every time.
Really great. Or the actual film version. I mean, For the Love of the Princess wasn't, it wasn't a feature in the film as it was on the album.
Right.
The La La Land release actually corrected that, and they released the piece Romantic Alliance, which is absolutely, James Horner at his very best. And I mean, he was, one of the very, very best when it came to underscoring pure emotion. And there are very few composers who could actually hold a candle to James Horner when it came to really finding the right tone for specific moments of a film. Be it, action adventure, be it, animation, or be it, a love story, which brings me to my second favorite, Legends of the Fall, which you also mentioned, Chris, which has so much emotion in there, and the piece called To the Boys, or the wedding. And it seems like every time when James Horner scored for a wedding, he pulled out all the stops, and
I just wanted to ask, I think the wedding is for James Horner what Final Confrontation is for Danny Elfman. There has to be 600 tracks just called The Wedding by James Horner.
It's true.
Yeah,
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, and Deep Impact as well, The Wedding.
Yep.
And
Bicentennial Man too, I think, has the wedding.
And they are always among the best cues.
Yeah, absolutely. And
or Deep Impact. Deep Impact has one too.
It did, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you also made a great point, Chris, when you mentioned the lengthy end credit pieces. They were almost like the movement of a whole symphony. When he wrote those, 15 minutes, 13 minutes pieces of music, which started at the end of the movie and then lasted for the entire end credits. I mean, he's done that a lot. He did that on Legends of the Fall. He did that on Windtalkers and on so many other pictures. And it's just, amazing testament to this man's gift for melody and for structure. And
and I think that's it's sad that doesn't happen so much anymore, because end credits are now treated as one, let's work a song in there that we can market and sell, some pop song or some pop songy version of the main theme or something like that, instead of treating the end credits as a part of the movie and a part of the film watching experience. And as you just kind of said that now, it just kind of opened up and became clear to me. It's that's partly why those particular scores where he does that works so well, because it doesn't just leave you like, okay, movie's over, hey, party, let's hear the pop song now, and then go back to the score after the pop song, whether it's a love song or whatever. It transitions you very nicely and smoothly from the end of the film into the end credits, and lets you as the viewer kind of start to decompress and start to, slowly come out of your investment into the story you were just told. And that's kind of a shame that doesn't happen so much, at least with the films that I see. That doesn't happen very often anymore.
No, you're totally right. This
Yep.
is really a forgotten crime. I mean, regarding pop songs, if they are songs based on the main title, which happened very often with Horner, like Horner wrote some of the best movie songs because those
Yeah.
songs were based off his themes. So
Yep.
I don't have a big problem with that, as I have with end credits, which have just pop songs that are not related to the rest of the music at
Yeah.
all. This is so annoying. And even even if modern end credits don't have songs and they have score, it's mostly just edited together from the rest
Yes.
of the album.
Right.
Really,
Exactly. Right.
the right suites are so rare today. I mean, I just saw The Last Jedi. It had one, obviously,
Yeah.
but in general, it's so rare, and is really a craft. And I think really Williams and Horner are the best in that regard because, as you both said, it's like if you want to relive the whole movie in 10 minutes, just listen to the end credits suite
It's true.
because it's just not a concert variation of one theme. No, the best end credit suites go through the most important themes.
Yes.
Like I mentioned Land Before Time as my favorite score, and the end credits in that one are amazing as well. When it starts with I think it's a friendship theme, and then goes to the main theme again. It's a short, I think it's just 6 or 7 minutes end credits, but those are amazing. It's really just like, okay, I want to relive the whole movie, but don't have the time for the whole album. Just listen to the end credits and get most of everything, and especially after watching the film and then letting the letters flow past your face, read the names of all the people who worked on that, and then have the music retell you what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
It's really good stuff.
I mean, but I've heard once that composers are so stressed and busy with coming up with music in the first place that there is not enough time to actually channel all of these ideas or write a big end credit. So the more comfortable or efficient way is to just take pieces of the score, edit them, and then put them into the end credits. That's what I've heard several times.
Yeah, I
that
can
makes
can
sense.
understand that. It really makes sense because
But
both production has been so tight nowadays that
Yeah, that's the problem.
composers are more occupied with rescoring scenes
Yes.
for
Yep.
day after day. That
Yes.
so I really don't blame them if it's like
Very true.
just yeah.
And you also
Yeah,
have to you also have to take into account that the editing process is much different now than it was
Yes.
30 years ago.
Sure.
Back then, when everything had to be transferred to magnetic tape, and the composers most likely had more time to breathe. And
Sure.
today they can make a cut within a couple of hours, and then the composer basically has to work around the clock, and it's so
Yep.
hard. I mean, it was pretty hard back then to keep up with the pace, but today it's terrifying.
Yeah,
It's
I mean-
unfortunate. It's unfortunate that they're put in that being put in that position now.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand the filmmaker as someone I think we all edited at some point, or very often with podcast interviews, or I have done a few short films. So from that point of view, of course, I'm happy that I can just open up Avid or Movie Maker or Adobe or whatever and just re-edit a scene in half an hour and suddenly it works again. But if you are a composer who actually wants to score to the scene and wants to go all Mickey Mouse basically and reference every single frame in your music, and then you find out that the whole scene has been not just a slight re-edit, no, the entire scene structure is different or something, and you have to not just, because in music, if you have like something from I don't know, Kroll, Willow or something where you can really pinpoint specific moments just by the music.
Sure.
And how do you want? You can't just re-edit a cue like this. You have to rescore. It's not like this is something a bit off topic that Lorne Balfe said once, because this is why so many composers nowadays compose with action scenes with obscenity, because you can just re-edit if you have a 4-minute cue that just goes
Right.
you can just, this is not I don't blame the composers for that. I mean,
Sure.
this is
That's what they have to
obviously
do.
it's more, and James Horner himself had an experience like this with Aliens when Michael was talking about how back then with the magnetic tape, and if you just edited something slightly, I just was thinking all the time about James Horner having the worst time of his life doing the finale for Aliens.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah. Aliens, the 80s, very nice.
Yes.
That actually brings me to my next question or the next topic I would like to talk about. What do you think, or which decades do you think was James Horner's most prolific one?
Ooh, Jesus Christ. Oh,
I think I tipped my hat on that one already. Prolific or hmm, I'll say, he was prolific in both the 80s and the 90s, but I'm gonna go with the 90s because 1995 always sticks out in my head with Braveheart, Casper, Apollo 13,
Yes.
Jumanji, Balto, and maybe even one more. I mean, there were so many score, and they're not, and most of them are really good. That was just a like the year of all years. I don't know how many composers have a year that they can hold up against that one, to be honest.
yeah, I think I might agree. Like, he has had to have great scores in each decade, obviously. I think the 2000s are out because there, and this sounds like hating on the man, but no, he had his typical stylistic devices, and in the 2000s it was the novelty of them really wore off. It was just very great scores, but you could almost in every one you could have points of, oh, I have that before, I've heard that before. The 80s have probably my most favorite scores of him, but overall it's like these highlights and then still many scores where he was trying to find his voice. And so I think I might agree with the 90s, though there are few that are high up in my favorites. It's a good decade to get almost all of his different styles that he could do. It's
true.
Probably the best representative of him.
Okay.
And like you said, you can't argue with a year like 1995. Especially Casper is such an underrated Horner score. I love that one so much.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Well, it's pretty difficult. I mean, if you look at the 80s, I mean, his style obviously, evolved. I mean, I think his writing in general was edgier in the 80s. But if you look at scores, like Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which is an amazing score.
Oh, yeah.
He had 48 Hours in there. Something Wicked This Way Comes. He did Cruel. He did Brainstorm in the 80s. He did Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, and it goes on and on. And the 80s are filled with quality. They got Aliens, You got An American Tale, you got Willow, Land Before Time, Cocoon, and so many brilliant scores. Glory was 89.
89. Yeah,
89.
Oh, I thought that was a 90s one.
No, it's an 80s score.
Oh, okay.
89, just barely.
Yeah, I must have mixed that one up in my head.
Yeah, I mean, 80s is a close second. I mean, the 90s, his 90s is an all-time great decade. I mean, it's just a phenomenal decade. So even if the 90s didn't exist and we just had the 80s of his, that's still a really, really awesome decade of music that he had
Obviously,
in the 80s.
yes.
Yes.
I mean, my second favorite of his is Kroll, probably. So that one is there. And I haven't even heard that one until this year when I got the La La Land. It was kind of a blind buy. And I loved it immediately. And well, then there's Willow as well.
Yes,
so,
Totally.
Well, Star Trek 2 was the movie that put him on the map for me.
Yep.
That's when I started, the first time I paid attention to the name. I was only, 13 years old when that came out. I don't think I even saw it in the theater. I think I saw it when it came out on Laserdisc or something. And I remember watching it and at the end, after having watched the whole film, I was like, man, it was such a good movie. And then it started to dawn on me how good the music was. And then there was his name. I'm like, okay. Or maybe it was in the opening credits was his name. I can't remember. In any case, it was that movie that put him on the roadmap to me. And then Crawl came out, I guess, that same year, but later in the year. I can't remember which came out first. But I started to, obviously there's some similarities on some level there. Of course, then Star Trek 3, I was like, oh, James Horner's back. That's great, And so, yeah, I mean, I can't really discount the 80s too much because that's when he became a thing.
Yeah. Kroll actually was 83 and Star Trek 2 82.
Oh, okay.
But Kroll is a very good example. And that is, one of the... it's a masterpiece of a score. I mean, this it's just the thematic material and how he, like James Horner always liked to say, he was weaving a carpet of themes and melodies and how he put that together. And it's Cruel is arguably top 5 James Horner material. That's
Oh yes. Although I must say, I love the themes of Crow, but I think the most perfect score would have been take the themes from Willow, because I like the themes from Willow more, but what he does to the themes, especially the action music, I like more from Crow, because Willow has might also be because of the long tracks.
Yeah.
But it drags very often. There is so much suspense material which just floats around with a few, I say sound effects, but I know they are organically, but it feels more like orchestral sound design. Let's call it that, because I don't know what the term is. And Willow very often stretches over those 18-minute tracks or something, but therefore it has better themes than Crow. So if you would take the style of Crow or the thematic variations, the orchestral writing, but with the melodies from Willow, it would be a masterpiece that the world does not deserve. But overall, I prefer Crow, because as you said, you can listen to the La La Land album and it never drags. The opening fanfare is such an earworm. I mean, I'm writing a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and listening to that one in the background, you immediately feel like, as I said, I was born 1993. I didn't live the 80s, but I immediately feel like one 80s kid in front of a D&D thing.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah. I mean, 80s. So, I mean, many consider his 80s to be the glory period, but
sure,
it's difficult. I mean, if you look at the 90s, he's done so much great stuff. The Rocketeer is so amazing. Sneakers, very good.
The only score I like that has saxophone in it.
Yeah.
What about Lethal Weapon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a big Lethal Weapon score fan.
Okay,
it's literally the only score with, outside of like a score that's set in, that is supposed to be like a something that has to do with jazz or something.
Yeah.
Outside of those kind of films, this is the only one that I actually own and listen to.
Okay. Sneakers, very, very good. I mean, the film is also very good. That's a very good film.
Great.
What else we got in the 90s? Jack the Bear is also very underrated. And
the Page Master.
The Page Master, yes.
I only have the standard edition, but as far as I know, La La Land doesn't add that much. But I remember, I haven't watched the movie in ages, but I remember being scared of it as a kid. But I got the CD around 2 years ago from a good friend. Here, a shout out to Michael Arlich, who gave me the CD. And it's not it's obviously not the level of Willow or Crow. It's not like the Horner classic. You put your finger when someone asks, which is the best Horner album? Oh yes, Page Master. Like, no, but it's still a bit underrated, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's in that ballpark for sure.
It is.
Searching for Bobby Fischer is one of my top 2. It goes back and forth between that and Braveheart.
Very good.
That's the chess movie, isn't it?
Say again?
Is that the chess movie?
Yeah.
Yes, it's the chess movie. But there's something just sublime about that score. Even though there's some similarities to other scores, there's something about that score. I always wanted, if I ever had the opportunity to interview James Horner, I was going to ask him about this score, because there's something in there that just feels more personal, and just like he poured himself into the. I mean, it sounds like that all the time, but there's something extra about this particular score. And whenever I listen to it, I can't even put my finger on what it is, but there's something in there that just goes deeper than almost any other score that I listen to. And I wish I could quantify it. I wish I could explain it with words, but I really can't. It's just a really special score to me, and it's just expansive, and I don't know. It's very hard to explain, but I really, truly love that score.
Yeah, I like it a lot as well. I mean, but it's also one of those scores that gets overlooked, unfortunately.
Yes.
Or just like he's recently before. Actually, this afternoon I was listening to Once Upon a Forest, which is also one of those scores that tend to get overlooked, but it's a very very lovely score, and it has that signature James Horner, the beautiful violin writing, the strings, the sweeping strings. I mean, he's like I said before, one of the absolute top guys when it came to writing a sweeping, emotional tearjerker of a melody. That's James Horner in a nutshell for me.
Yeah. And another film that came out around the same time as Searching for Bobby Fischer, and that is The Man Without a Face, which I think was Mel Gibson's directorial debut. That movie doesn't get talked about very much. I think it's a really, really good movie, and I think James Horner's score is just so heartbreakingly beautiful, as so many of his scores are. It's really, really well done, and it's just an emotional gut punch, both the film and the score. But I really, really love that score.
Well, I think Gibson and Horner in general is a duo that's not often talked about. Like if someone says Horner, the first directors, everyone, either James Cameron or Ron Howard. And then you have the usual other suspects like Elfman and Burton, Howard and Shyamalan, Williams and Spielberg, obviously, Nolan and Zimmer nowadays. But Gibson and Horner is something that very rarely comes. I mean, all right, they didn't have like 20 million pictures together, but they did have a few. And
3.
They produced. Is it just 3? I thought
3.
there was more. Like we have Apocalypto, we have Braveheart, we have Man Without a Face. Wasn't there one more?
I don't think so.
No, I got my my problem. For some reason, I thought that New World was Gibson, but that was Malick.
That's Terrence Malick,
Yeah, I mixed that one up. No, okay, so it's maybe that's the problem because it were just 3 scores, but those 3 are
really good. A really good combination each time.
Absolutely. You've just mentioned Ron Howard's. They did quite a few pictures together. Let me check that. They did Willow, Ransom, Cocoon, Beautiful Minds, and Apollo 13. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and The Missing.
Oh wow, it's quite a few. More than I thought.
Yeah, A Beautiful Mind is in my top 5 as well. This one is.
Yes.
I mean, it's almost illegal how gut punching that one is.
Yeah, criminal.
It's horrible. The one I really can't talk about is How the Grinch Stole Christmas, because I never really listened to that music because I saw the film once, just a few. It wasn't a childhood classic as it was for some others. I watched it once, like 5 years ago, and I absolutely hated it. And so I know it's bad. Usually I'm not like this, but I didn't have the desire to revisit the music. Okay. I have that rarely because so many bad movies have great scores. So I'm like, what? Why can't you separate that?
It's an okay score. It's not great, but oddly enough, I really love the film. I watch it every Christmas.
We won't become any big friends this day.
I mean, I do love the film, but it's an okay score.
It's okay. I mean, that's one of the scores and films that I usually skip as well. I mean, it's I'm not fond of the movie, I must admit, and the score, like you said, Chris, is okay. It's not his best, not his worst. It's in the middle somewhere.
It's not a score I return to listen to at all.
One of the, Ransom, for instance. It's a very good film. I like it a lot, and I think the score works well inside the picture. But out of context, it's one of those albums that I'm also not too thrilled about.
There's like 1 or 2 tracks in there. There's one that has the Irish bagpipes or something going on, and I think that's the only one that I actually listen to.
Oh, yes. The one James Horner score with the Irish bagpipes.
There's quite a few, Willow, qualifies as one of his best, totally.
Oh, yes.
Beautiful, for sure.
Beautiful Mind. Sure. Beautiful Mind is absolutely beautiful. Apollo 13 is absolutely stunning, and I wish they released an official complete score of Apollo 13.
Yes. That needs to happen.
Yes, the official album is absolutely not sufficient here.
For sure. It's got the best parts, but there's so much more that needs to be released. I'm surprised it hasn't been done yet, actually.
At least not legally.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
there? Does one know why? Is there like a legal problem? Something like there are some expanded releases that come very late because there's legal issues and stuff. I think. I don't know. There was one reason. I think Titanic was one where the because of the. Oh no! It's the song is on the new 4-disc set, not
Yeah.
because of some legal stuff. But is Apollo 13? Does that one have? Does one know why it's not out yet?
I really don't
I
know.
don't know.
I mean,
I imagine that is the reason, but I don't know.
it could be a legal issue. It could be a quality issue that the master tapes have a poor quality. It's they could be lost as well. I mean, that's also that just happened in the past. That scores were just gone and lost. And
Yeah, there isn't there one very famous example. I know Rain Man is probably the best example for bad master tapes, and then you're doing a really bad expanded edition.
Yep.
But isn't there one like that? I think there's one very famous score where everybody's like, well, for some reason the master tapes are gone. But I don't know. No, okay, but it's not.
yeah, I know what you mean. It's at the tip of my tongue actually, but I can't think of it. The Missing. Anybody familiar with film and score?
Sorry.
I never saw the film. I did listen to the score back when it came out, however long ago, 10 plus years ago. And I think I liked it, but it's not one that I return to very, very often.
Okay. I think the film is worth watching.
What is it about?
Well, I haven't seen it in a couple of years, and I actually can't.
kind of,
I could.
I don't
it's a
need
Western,
very
right?
It's a western, yes. It's
yeah. I
It's
would have never thought about
Kate
that. So that's-
Blanchett,
Tommy Lee
and
Jones.
Tommy Lee Jones, and like there's a ghost or something in it. Or she
Yeah.
loses her daughter. Or
Yeah.
something.
Right. And I couldn't summarize the story right now. I just all I can tell you that I actually kind of liked it. I mean, maybe I should watch it again. I will find out I dislike it now. But the score was, I think, good. I mean, there were some, one of the themes was actually quite close to Braveheart. And it's also one of those examples where he wrote a really beautiful, lengthy, lavish, symphony movement kind of, piece of music that stretches all the way through the end credits.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you should check it out again. The score it's kind of actually exciting. Since we're talking about James Horner and we've kind of mentioned the self-references and plagiarism, I feel we have to talk about it. What do you feel? And what are your thoughts on James Horner's self-references and plagiarism?
Ooh.
Toughy.
I think you can't ignore it, and because it is there, and some scores really I listened to Troy the first time some weeks ago, and it was a pleasant listen, but it was obviously it felt like a best of Horner. Amazing Spider-Man, although it's a top 5 for me, has some very obvious ones, so you can't ignore it. But I think. First, I just like his style so much that I most of the time can excuse it, and even if I can not, at least there's copying oneself and copying oneself. At least his writing is still very complex. It's not like some other composers lifting entire sections, and the section wasn't very complex or interesting to begin with. With James, it's always pretty complex writing, and I think maybe I'm a bit biased because I just like his style so much that I don't mind it too much. But there are portions where I'm when I listened to Amazing Spider-Man the first time, there were a few times where I was like, Jesus Christ, really? The one thing that I will always defend, however, is his danger motive, because I don't consider that one stealing or self-plagiarism. I think that's a legit calling card, a legit watermark, something that he very consciously, fully self-aware puts into all of his music, instead of lifting or just slightly altering the Titanic theme for Avatar. This is a different thing altogether, and obviously stuff like Willow's main theme being from is it
Rheingold.
Right. Yes, exactly. And to be fair, the danger motive is from Rachmaninoff as well. So you can't ignore the thing. And I get it when people, like when, especially some of his more modern ones after the 2000s, especially 2010s, when people are like, really, yeah, it's not bad, but I just can't get over hearing so many other scores in it. I can totally get that. I won't talk crap to anyone who
Yeah,
really has an issue with it, but disregarding his whole career because of that, I
that's
think that's unfair. I can get it
totally.
if some people are bothered more than others, but yeah.
Yeah, I feel similarly. Although my feelings over the years have changed about it. I guess when I first started noticing it myself, it became distracting and disappointing whenever I'd hear it, and I'd get fairly upset about it, only because I knew how talented this man was, and it's like you can do something different and new, and I want to hear that. I don't want to hear what you've already done. And so from on that level, it was very frustrating because I wanted him to continue to exercise those creative muscles that he has. He's so talented. And so that was the frustration that I felt personally, though I didn't, or at least I don't think I came to the point of demeaning his career or calling him a hack, or he, for whatever reason, he did what he did, especially in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Even so, there's still some gems in the 2000s, like The House of Sand and Fog. I love that score.
Perfect
It's
storm.
very
Yes.
subdued and minimal, but it's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So even in that period of time when he self-references more than any other, there's still some real gems in there. My frustration was built around him not doing something different, not doing something new. I think the danger motif bothered me more than it sounds like it bothered you guys. Even if he was aware of it, it was just so distracting. And again, this is for film music people. 99% of the audience is clueless. They have no idea what
Of
that
course.
is, that it's been used before. So it was just frustrating from this film music fan's perspective, in that I want you to hear you do something different. Maybe that's not
Yeah.
a realistic expectation. I mean, given what he did in the 90s, I mean, there's similarities there, but yet there was still freshness within what
Yeah.
he was doing too.
Absolutely.
Now I'm at the place where, whatever, like you said, you like his style of music. And even though it's repetitious and it's borrowed here and there, I don't really care because I like the way it sounds.
Yes.
And so now it doesn't bother me at all, but it did at the time, more early this millennium than
Yeah.
it does now.
But I think music-wise, when it comes to judging an artist or to, let's say, evaluate his work, I think you always need to see the complete picture, as opposed to judging someone on a few mistakes or on a few faux pas.
Sure.
It's the same with any non-artist. I mean, I don't judge a friend or a person on a few screw-ups, and I always try to look at the complete picture. And in terms of James Horner, the danger motif, which popped up so many times, I felt that it was appropriate on many scores and also inappropriate on other scores, like the boy in his striped pajamas. There was a danger motif, and I thought it was a bit out of place.
Especially in a film like that, you don't want an Easter egg in a film like that. You can put that in Avatar and Troy, which are just fun blockbusters, but doing a film like this and then do this thing, which you will like. Either people will be happy and like, oh, I spotted the Easter egg, or they will be angry because you copied yourself another time, and you don't want that in a film like this.
But
like,
again,
seriously.
most people have they have no idea.
Of course, but still,
No.
like that would excuse anything. Like with that logic, you could just write a bad score and that's it.
Well,
just,
I don't know.
an uninspired one. Like I
It still
still
needs
think
to function. It still needs to function in the film or TV show or what have you. But they're not writing the scores for us.
Yeah, sure.
Of course. No. I totally get that. This is a totally different thing, obviously. But I just think like that having music work in your picture is not that hard. Like, I mean, I worked for 3 years for a German television producer, which just really bad reality TV. And we had some stock music there. Like sometimes we use licensed film scores and stuff, but sometimes just stock music for some chase. It was stuff about the police and stuff like that. And just put a drum loop under it, and it works for a chase scene. So that logic, you could make everything just work in the picture. And I still think like danger motive in a film like this, such a serious thing. I don't, even if of course nobody will notice that except for the film, but still I can get when people like, no, not in that film.
Yeah, sure. But danger motif, one thing. But he did have. I mean, I'm not trying to say anything derogatory. I mean, I hold James Horner, I hold this man in very high regards, and he is one of my, my third favorite composer, of
Me
the,
too.
yeah. But he also pulled off quite a few faux pas. I mean, we had, an example, the Spiderwick Chronicles and Casper,
Oh yes.
he basically, took the One Last Wish piano motif and reused it in the Spiderwick Chronicles. Or there's also a very strong resemblance between Bicentennial Man and A Beautiful Mind. In 1981, James Horner scored Wolfen, and one of the motifs was, exactly reused in Aliens 5 years later.
But
He,
can't we do this with any composer
Yeah,
who's written as many scores?
yes, totally,
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, but I still think Horner is a bit special in that regard. Like, I mean, you have portions like this in every thing. Like, my favorite composer, James Newton Howard, and just last year in Fantastic Beasts, there's a section that is entirely lifted. It's just a few seconds, but it's King Kong, exactly the same, and some string movements is very much like King Kong. Hans Zimmer has many scores where you can pinpoint certain, like Black Rain and The Dark Knight is one of the most famous ones.
Yeah.
But I still, John Williams has also a few tracks. Like you have the Trade Federation March, which is very reminiscent of some of the Nazi music from the third Indiana Jones movie. Like, of course, you have, but like every composer, of course, has his trademarks, has some melodies that sound alike. But I still think that Horner is a bit of a different. Like Horner is very, very obvious.
The worst offender.
Yeah, I think so. Like I still, as Michael said, I hold him in just as high as regard. He is also in my top 5. I think 3 as well. 3 comes very close. I love that man to death, but I'm not like he's really the worst offender in that case. That doesn't undo all his the great stuff he did, but I really don't think you can just disregard them. Everybody does that.
Yeah. Sure.
I really don't think that many composers have done such blatant lifts as the Spiderwick Casper one or something, and especially not that often. Like there are so many scores where you can do it. You have some things that appear in 3, like Bicentennial Man, and then
count the number of scores he wrote and put that up against any other composer, any other. And I mean, it's not to justify it or excuse it, but you write that many scores, there's going to be, who knows the situations with some of these, productions where it's like, okay, bro, you've got a week, go.
Yeah.
Especially Troy, for example. That
Totally.
Of course, this is exact. I don't want to blame entirely. You don't know what happened, but still, it's really like, of course, he wrote many scores, but so did other composers. And if you really look at the ratio, it's really strong with Horner. Again, it doesn't ruin his entire career for me or something, but I can understand people who are like, well, if you have listened to 5 Horner scores, you know them all or something.
Yeah, that's just
it's not.
That's just patently untrue.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I just felt I should bring this topic up. I mean, since we're talking about his entire career, but
this has to be addressed.
You can't ignore it. You can't ignore it.
Totally. But I think, I mean, there is always, I mean, we've all made valid points here, but I think people just simply over-dramatize it at some time, at some point. I think when you look at directors that work with the same actors, or the director uses the same lighting, the same cinematography, or sort of the similar style, people are not likely to say, well, he does the same crap all over again.
True.
I think that's a different thing, because this is like having a director use the same lighting or the same actors is for me more in line with composer having his stylistic diva, like Horner having his choir and his piano
Yeah.
and stuff like that. I think this is the better comparison, because I can't right now think of a filmmaker who lifts entire shots into another movie or something.
It's like Disney animation, where they reuse some of the same
Yes.
exact dancing routines and that sort of thing, or it's like, oh, they just took the exact same.
The Disney classic. This is the best example, where you have like this one dancing scene that's in like Robin Hood, The Jungle Book, and I think in 2 movies more, and you can really pinpoint the movement is exactly the same. This is a valid comparison. Of course, that then was just to save money and costs and stuff like that.
And so, perhaps for Horner too.
Yeah, probably. I mean,
perhaps.
Exactly. We don't know what happened, but I think it's really, this is what I meant. I'm somewhere in the middle. You have people who like over dramatize it and are like, well, Horner is completely useless because everything sounds the same. That is not true. But on the other hand, you can't go, no, I don't care, because everybody has similarities here and there and stuff like that. No, you can't also completely ignore it. You have to address that it's there, as we do in this podcast, and you can say some scores are worse in that regard than others. And then, of course, like completely objectively. Subjectively, it's like with me, where I'm like, I love his style just so much that it doesn't bother me that much. But objectively, I can totally see, while you are sitting there and asking yourself, like, how did that happen, that it's so much? And I can see why some people are annoyed by it, but both extremes are obviously wrong. And of course, we won't find a solution to it here, because this has been argued, I think, since the 80s. I think when Horner started, it already came up.
Yes. But in the end, what do you do? Okay, you don't ignore it, and you accept it, and you say, okay, this is bad. Do you demote him down your favorites list because of it? What is the end result of dealing with this question or this potential problem? That's, to me, like, where do you go with it? Do you just then say, oh, well, he can't be the best because he copied himself too much? Is that what we end up saying in the end, or what?
Yeah,
I think that's,
totally.
I must say, I actually say that, like, I think I could justify Horner as my number one, because there is so much, as much as I love his writing, there is so much that's just too similar, not just similar, too similar. So I think he couldn't be a number one for, he isn't a number one for me, but this is what I meant with middle ground. This is just my opinion, but I think that, as I said, this is so subjectively, because someone who doesn't like his style to begin with is obviously more annoyed at the repetition than someone who loves his style and stuff like that. And this is why I try, as I also do in my reviews, try to separate between subjective and objective. And objectively, I think there's some middle ground. I mean, you have to acknowledge it, but you can't disregard the talent the man obviously had. Like, if you have a section, if you look at something where this is a theme he wrote, this is not from Rachmaninoff or whoever, and this was original for that film, and look at that composition, and you just see, no, this is legitimately great music. You can't, and then you come to the point what you said, where you're like, well, if he could do that, it could be so original and great. Why didn't he do it more often? And but this is a different thing. You can't disregard the talent the man had. He is not like someone who just you only used classical melodies and then copied himself all over again. When he was original, he was terrific. And this is why he's my number 3, perfectly in the middle of my top 5. Because it's 50-50.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very difficult, but I'm not really annoyed by the plagiarisms or the self-references. I mean, there have been a couple of occasions when I went, oh, okay, maybe you could have avoided that, but I wasn't really, offended, or I wasn't really angry, or I would never ever say, James Horner, I would, kick him out of my top 5 of the best composers just because of that. Because, like I said initially, it's always a complete picture, and when he was first and foremost, he was a world-class dramatist, and his understanding of emotion, how to pinpoint that and how to, let's say, express himself was unique, and he is one of the composers that simply also sparked my interest in music. he was one of the guys that got me started as a film music collector and lover, and it's hard to find anybody especially today that I think has the same kind of ability, or maybe they do have the ability, but producers and directors say, well, we don't want that. So it's always hard. It's always hard to tell what is the inability of a composer and what is the
what are they giving the room to do?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you can so often see with some, like, just now I haven't heard it yet, but I've read somewhere that Henry Jackman's Jumanji sequel score is surprisingly good. I have read that from some people who were totally against him having that. When I one friend of mine who was like so angry when Jackman got the gig because he hated his Kong score so much, and this is now his favorite score of the month. I still haven't got around to listen to it.
I have it, but I haven't listened to it yet.
Because you can, this is the perfect example of a composer who is obviously like, if the director wants you to, or the project, like what I said with the Lorne Balfe quote earlier, if the project is so has such a tight schedule that you just can't go with a 10-minute completely orchestral, perfectly composed piece, but have to just write a bunch of ostinato. Like if you're working with Christopher Nolan, of course you're just writing 5 suites and let the editor do the rest because Christopher Nolan wants that.
Yep.
So and then if you working for, I don't know, a Gore Verbinski or something, you can. And also my last bit for the plagiarism thing, I just want to say that many people are a bit hypocritical when it comes to that, because they are like, well, you can't call Horner a thief or a copyist or something, but then go on and call someone like Hans Zimmer to be always delivering the same thing. And this is something where I get where I'm like, but enough of that, as you said. But I think I agree, Michael. Maybe there are composers who can do what Horner did, but if they are not, if so, they are not allowed, because I can't put my finger on anyone who would come close nowadays, especially from the, like, obviously I love James Newton Howard, and he has some Horner-like tracks in some of his scores, but especially from the new generation, although there are some terrific composers out there, there probably isn't one where I'm like, oh, this could be the next James Horner. Like, we have Giacchino, who was the next John Williams for many people, and there are one or two where I'm like, they could be the next Hans Zimmer, the Hans Zimmer that I like, but I am not sure whether there's a next James Horner.
I mean, he's one of the art, one in a million kind of artist. It's like now, Jerry Goldsmith. Jerry Goldsmith was one of the absolutely most brilliant composers of all time, and you will, I don't think there will ever be another Jerry Goldsmith. And in a similar way, I feel the same way about James Horner. There are so many great composers out there, but I don't really think there is, there has been a new talent out there that's, comes even close to his ability, at least from what I can judge, what I've heard. If that's
I'll push back on that a little bit now, and let me give you some context to what I'm about to say. You've been talking about Horner being, I think, the third on your guys' list. He's probably number 2 for me, only behind John Williams. And I'll say, I think there are people out there who could. I don't think there's anyone out there doing what James Horner did, but I think there are guys and gals out there who could. A couple that come to mind, I think, given the opportunity, and he has had the opportunity in the past, Benjamin Wallfisch could go there.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Some of his work that he's done in the past, he's kind of moving away from it now, which I'm sad about. But some of his work in the past is in that genre.
The stuff he wrote for Marianelli as an additional composer, you can see stuff like that.
Totally.
Wallfisch's. And I totally like. This is the thing about what I meant, like, with the style is so much on. It's a very obvious style. I just can't find a better word now. Like special intervals or special things in the orchestration, like when he the way he uses his strings with woodwinds together, which are like so pure Horner. This is why the Magnificent Seven score last year sounded still so much like him because his team, like Simon Franklin and I don't know someone else who basically wrote the score based on what Horner already wrote to the first draft of the screenplay. So obviously his style is.
But I don't mean just copying his style, but being able to write with that kind of emotion and to tap into those kinds of emotion and be so blatant about it and not kind of have to tone it down because you're being manipulative with my emotions. I think there are people out there, composers out there, if given the chance, and that could and would do that. They just don't get the opportunity because people don't want them.
I would throw in James Newton Howard again, as I mentioned earlier, who has done a few things where I'm just so emotional. And I think, although he also hasn't done much in that regard, but I think Austin Wintory could do that.
He could. Yes.
Because, like my favorite of his is Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which isn't very emotional, but Abzu is so melodical, it's so beautifully orchestrated, and this one is just a roller coaster ride of emotions, of
very
just
good.
Pure beautiful. And I think if you would give Austin Wintory like a cheesy romance movie or something, he would write one of the best romantic scores ever.
Yep, could be very true.
Yeah, I think there are guys and gals out there who could do it. They just don't. At least with really big time films, they're not getting the chance. I'm thinking of that British BBC TV show, The Paradise. Maurizio Malagnini, he's a really good composer, and he's written some beautiful music. And I would love to see more people like that. Panu Altia, I'd love to hear more from him. I mean, they're
thinking about him as well.
That general direction, but they do smaller films and little documentaries and stuff like that, and they just don't get the chance.
Yes,
but because the big movies don't want that kind of music.
Exactly.
Because, as you said, nowadays. Emotional means manipulative, and most audiences don't want. Like I have heard many, like when I was, which movie? Gods of Egypt, another contender for horrible movie but great score by Marco Beltrami. And I was watching a video review by some YouTuber just of the movie, and in one sentence she also said like she loved the movie because it was so bad. She was like, this is one of the best guilty pleasures I have ever watched. And then she was like, and then you have the scenes and the music is just going all epic and awesome and telling you this is important right now, this is epic and whatever. And she was clearly like, she loved it in the guilty pleasure kind of sense, on the hate watching, but what she basically was saying, like the music telling me something is epic or whatever is not good. And many people feel like that today, directors and producers obviously, but there are also audience members. Like we often blame, like, why can't directors let their composers be emotional or something? Well, many audiences, like, look at how Dunkirk was praised this year by so many audiences who actually liked that the music was unemotional. I have, and not just general, like a friend of mine who is really into some art house stuff and whatever, and he loves good film music. He's a great fan of Alexandre Desplat and stuff. He has absolutely nothing against emotional orchestral music. But with Dunkirk, he was like, he actually liked it because it wasn't emotional, it wasn't, and he used the horrible word manipulative. And this is something like many people nowadays feel like that, and
it's sad but true. I mean, it's always a double-edged sword, and I think, well, when it comes to Dunkirk, and actually Chris and I spoke about that before you joined us, I really don't understand why many people or why some journalists called it Hans Zimmer's best score. I really don't see why anybody could say that. It's I'm actually one of those guys that praised the score inside the picture, but as an album, I felt it was really hard to sit through, and it's tough to, really unpleasant. But in terms of, well, I have always been an advocate of, strong emotional, music, and to go back to Jerry Goldsmith, who once said, music is not necessarily about what's on the screen, but it's about what the audience should be feeling. And that sums it up. I mean, I like I mean, I'm a very, I'm receptive to emotion. I like, cheesy themes. I like, big string motifs. I like
Hmm.
being, emotionally guided in some way, because many films, and I've recently, when James Newton Howard was in a let's say discussion round table, one of the guys said, sometimes if you take away the music from a scene, there's nothing left. And that's kind of a valid point. Some movies work better without wall-to-wall music, and some need a really strong thematic score that kind of captivates the audience, that mesmerizes the audience. If you look at the movie like Gladiator, or if you look at Titanic, or if you look at Braveheart, what would you feel about that movie if it wasn't for the score, or if it had a different score?
Right.
Those movies would not be the same. You know,
It's true.
at,
Very
at,
true.
at least that's my 2 cents. And I've talked to composers who said that nowadays, even when a score is recorded with a full orchestra and you have the the strings and the French horns and also percussion underneath, they just kind of pump up the volume of the percussion and they bury the rest right under it, and that's kind of a sad thing to
Yeah.
do, because they seem to believe that if you put on percussion and percussive elements, you can't go wrong with that. And it's just not the same. The scene might be propelled by the percussion and the elements, but I do not gravitate towards that. I feel that the scene could be much better if there was a proper score. That's me.
Yeah.
But I think it comes down to that, about that being you. I mean, I agree, as you said before. I think you said you just gravitate to great melodic themes and big orchestrations and stuff, and I'm just like that. If I hear something like Dunkirk, I'm also like, yeah, no, it doesn't really do anything for me. It's not really unpleasant for me because I have a thing for unpleasant sounds and stuff, but I t- most of the time I agree, but the thing is really just that's how we are. I think I did have that discussion a few times in the last few weeks, as we were talking about the modern state of film music and how it's degenerating and everything is bad and whatever. And as you said, Chris, it's about the modern audience, as you just said about audiences not noticing the stuff we do. Also, we have to, like, we can write all the bad reviews about stuff like Dunkirk or whatever, but and I would do that as well, because I also think, like, yeah, you have to address the emotions and whatever. But the thing is, then you just see how many people love that, and you just notice, well, it's there are these people and these people. You also just said like Gladiator wouldn't be the same without the music or with different music. This is obviously a fact. Like nobody would disagree with that it wouldn't be the same. But I think today there might be people who think it might be better with a more modern score or whatever.
Yeah.
I wouldn't agree with that. This is not my opinion, but there are.
Sure.
I haven't talked to anyone because this is a very specific example. But I'm
Sure.
pretty sure there are people who think like that. What you say about the percussion?
Yeah.
Percussion is really working these. Like I'm always annoyed when I hear it, but then you look at the YouTube comments regarding the Star Wars trailers. How bummed the people are that the trailer music style force theme variations are not in the actual scores, because the scores sound like typical John Williams pure
that's very
orchestral
true.
stuff. And
Very
in the trailers we had the typical Hans Zimmer like rock band percussion hitting the important beats and stuff like that, and people love that. They are like, this speaks to them, and of course composers and directors address that. And
Yes.
this is pro and contra. On the one hand, obviously, I looking at some films and thinking to myself, man, this could have had such a great sweeping orchestral score. But on the other hand, I'm like, well, I have around 3 decades of that I can look to, so why not have these people have theirs? Especially, it's just a phase. Like, you can, it's really that we could always talk about decades, but it's really funny how it really is decades. Like, this is clearly something that obviously started in the end of the 2000s, but really went off in the 2010s.
Yeah.
With Inception and stuff. True. This is when, like, we had stuff like this before, especially from Hans with The Dark Knight, but Inception was the one where it just really drove everything home. And pretty sure around 2020 there will be something else. Maybe we will like whatever is coming,
so.
maybe we won't.
Okay, gentlemen, let me thank you again for joining me, and I appreciate you taking your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, sure.
Bye-bye.